Welcome everybody to this global talk on decolonizing WASH sector knowledge and decolonizing systems thinking. Just to start off with, on the 18th of June, IRC posted a message from our CEO on Black Lives Matter with a commitment to the global struggle against racism, to do more to tackle racism and institutional discrimination, and to carry out an internal review on our diversity performance by the end of the year. Now, we are very happy to have found two young, undaunted voices to help IRC kickstart discussions on our commitments to Black Lives Matter. Both have written provocative thought pieces on decolonization of knowledge management within the WASH sector and decolonization of systems thinking, respectively. I will interview both guest speakers about their thought pieces, and you are invited to submit your questions in the chat box, and the chat moderator will select a number of them for the speakers to respond to after the interview. So our two guest speakers for today are, let me get the next slide. First up, we have Euphratesia Luesca. She is a WASH governance consultant who has been active in the WASH sector for 11 years. She has worked for the USAID Kenya Integrated Water and Sanitation and Hygiene Project, KIWASH, also for the Kenya Water and Sanitation and Civil Society Network, SNV, and the UN University. And she is also a 2013 YEP Water alumnus. So YEP is a program run by the Netherlands Water Partnership, who are in the same building as IRC. And there on the screen, you will see her thought piece, a link to her thought piece, and also a discussion on her thought piece that took place or still taking place on the RWSN-D group. And our second speaker is Alara Adali. She is a writer and a facilitator and an historian by training. She currently works for the Climate Museum UK, that is a mobile and digital museum, and My Grateful, which runs cookery classes led by refugees, asylum seekers and migrants in London and Bristol. And she's also a steering committee member of the London International Development Network, who work on organizational change and systems thinking. So now I will ask Euphrasia some questions about her thought piece, and I will stop sharing the screen. Just a minute. Yes, okay. So Euphrasia, your thought piece called Initiating Decolonization of WASH Sector Knowledge on Medium got an applause from Water for People CEO Eleanor Allen, and has so far generated over 20 reactions when it was posted on the RWSN-D group, Leave No One Behind. You begin your opinion piece by quoting Bruce Boyce, who wrote, "While the physical colonization of the countries of the global south by the countries of the global north may have ended, knowledge colonialism continues." So can you give some examples of knowledge colonialism in the WASH sector?
Thank you so much, Carl, for this whole session. And thank you for the question as well. But before I continue discussing the same, I'd like to first read a quote from Ruchika, because I believe that decolonization is a topic that is kind of very sensitive, and sometimes people can get it all mixed up. So Ruchika T says, "I say this in my classes. The problem isn't men, it's patriarchy. The problem isn't white people, it is white supremacy. The problem isn't straight people, it's homophobia. Recognize systems of oppression before letting individual defensiveness paralyze you from dismantling them." So we are basically talking about the white supremacy and the effects of the same in the WASH sector. I will give a very practical example that is also technical of sorts. And because IRC uses the systems thinking, I believe this example is also linked on the same. Now, my example is more on unrevenue water management, and I'll give the case of Kenya. Now, in Kenya, last week we got our impact report released. The impact report is basically a document that is released by the national regulator on the performance of water utilities in the country. And now, interestingly enough, our non-revenue water levels went high again this year, and you were given a figure of 43%. Now, giving that in terms of monetary values, we are losing approximately 74 million euros per annum. At the same time, in terms of volume, we are losing around 115 cubic meters of water. And this could easily supply the main city like Nairobi for the next 5 months in a reliable manner. And currently, our whole city is having a whole issue in terms of water supply amid COVID-19. But what struck me so much as a water expert when I read these figures was an article by a journalist who indicated that, interestingly, our resource mobilization activities have gone are performing much better. And here it was specifically on donor funding. And this has been going higher and higher and higher as years go by. But interestingly enough, despite the donor funding going high, our non-revenue water is also going high. The trends should actually be the opposite way. If we have increased donor funding, probably the non-revenue water levels should be coming low. So I went to inquire on the same, and it's quite interesting to understand how the issues of colonization in the water sector are affecting the same. Now, first and foremost, what I found out was the issue of project design. I will use the term Northerners for now, but I don't believe we have North and South people because I believe we are one people. Now, the North people will come into the country, and these are the donors. They will come into the country, identify challenges in the water sector, go back into their countries, develop proposals that are bankable, get the funding, and they come back to the country in terms of now kicking off the project. Now, this is the first aspect in terms of project design. Then the Southerners are not involved in the design process. Now come to issues with regards to project implementation. The first area that you're having, the second area that you're also having issues to do with colonization is the project design. The MOUs and any other legal documents are developed from the North. They come into the South, and the Southerners have to go ahead and sign these documents. And even if they have components that they feel they're not too comfortable with, it becomes a challenge renegotiating some of these articles or maybe amending them. So they go ahead, and what happens next is that you are implementing problems, they're implementing mistakes. This is where the problems start from. Now, from this perspective, we are having projects that are already designed from the North. Now, they're addressing issues that they think they should be addressed from their perception. They're not addressing issues that the Southerners have sit down and told them, this is what we need you to come along and support us on. So in this case, they pick up sites that are already served with water. And the reason why they pick up the sites that are already served with water is because they can be able to give them the results faster and go back to the donor, get additional funding because it will be have done a good job in the short time possible. So they go back to the donor, get more funding, and develop more pilots. Now, this is the challenge. When you keep on doing the same, eventually we're having as a water utility only serving a particular component, the people who can pay for water, because these are the already served. So what happens to the unserved? What happens to the underserved? You can see the issues of equity in terms, and water is a basic human right, are coming into interplay. Now, the next problem, again, in terms of how the MOUs are designed, is the issue of organizational structure. When they get this funding, most of the time the staff are coming from the North. Staff from the North are more expensive than staff from the local areas. Now, what happens in terms of project design and donor funding? A lot of budgets are going into the issues of addressing staff costs instead of issues of addressing water services. And that is what we should all be determined to support. Then the other aspect is the issue also to do with procurement. Procurement in terms of goods, procurement in terms of services. So in terms of the staffing, they will pick the their own. I've already discussed about it. In terms of the goods, when you look at issues to do with non-revenue water, they require disruptive innovations and basically disruptive technologies, the smart meters, the prepaid meters, issues to do with the softwares and the likes. So what are the locals told? We want you to get into probably a PPP agreement or any other alternative mode of financing, and eventually you're purchasing items that are coming from the northern side. They're not locally purchased. So what happens when a system breaks down? Whether you bought a prepaid meter, for instance, what happens to it? You have to go back and purchase from there. So how much time does it give in terms of even for services to continue and the likes? And this puts us all in a vicious cycle where when the donor leaves the scene, the system will break down, and it will break down for good. Then the last aspect is the issues to do with accountability, and this is the social accountability aspect. The MOUs can be clear in terms of how we want to monitor our data and maybe monitor the activities that are being implemented. But the problem now comes in from this perspective. Who puts the donor in check? Who puts the donor in check from the perspective of social accountability, where we ask, you indicated that you're going to implement 1 to 10 activities, but probably have only do 1 to 3. So what about the rest? Apart from that, the information that now goes back to the main donor, if you're an implementing partner, in terms of the data, in terms of the performance, the Southerners do not have a say on the same. And this is why the donors keep on implementing projects that can only last at the level of pilot. They not move into the level of a project. And that's why we continue remaining in this vicious cycle of implementation of a pilot, but it can never lead into a project that eventually can be able to serve people for a long time. Therefore, the people who probably were served before and their systems cannot be repaired, they go back into the issues of commercial losses of non-revenue water because they will not pay for services that they don't receive. And then the people who are unserved and underserved, they go back into issues of vandalizing system, and there we have technical losses. And that is why in Kenya, we are coming from so far, yet moving very little in the water sector, because this cycle keeps on going on. Money comes in, but it doesn't make any impact. There's no value for money. We have so many white elephants. That's the dilemma of decolonization and of colonization of knowledge in the water sector. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that good examples from Kenya. We have to look at the time, so I'll just ask you the second question, leave the third question later, maybe for the discussion. In your contribution to the RWSND group, you give some ideas of what is required to decolonize WASH sector knowledge. Can you elaborate a bit on some of those key requirements?
Okay, because of time as well, probably I'll just brush through the main points. I think the first thing that we really need to do is to work on our mind. I believe if you cannot change your mind, you cannot be able to change anything. So let us work with the issues of changing our mind first. Alari in her write-up indicated that some of these processes take time. They're also quite intricate. It's not going to happen tomorrow. So let's first invest in ourselves as individuals and try to decolonize our minds first before we can be able to change anything. So we start with the mind, we start with the hand, and then we can with the heart, and then we can change anything else. And then apart from that, I believe it's important for us to define what is a good knowledge management product, or what is a good knowledge product for the WASH sector. And this is so important because especially to do with issues of data. Data is like the new oil. And if if it's not there, it cannot be able to combust so many things. We get data wrong, we are getting funding mechanisms wrong, we are getting policies wrong, we are getting so many things wrong. So let us define a good knowledge product. And then from there, we can even be able to define who's a good knowledge producer. In terms of your role core, where you're seated, how can we really redefine and say that you're doing the right thing in the sector in terms of giving us products that are not colonized? Then at the same time, strengthen the systems that are in place, strengthen the systems in terms and the systems as well as the structures that are in place. And this actually goes into the issues to do with policy to inform donor financing better. And at the same time, now here we will look into issues of design of MOUs of donor funding into South projects. We will look into issues of procurement processes. When we say that we are an equal opportunity employer, what do we really mean as maybe as a northern or a donor? You know, can that be redefined? Issues to do with multilingualism.
Hello?
Call that I also indicated. Then also, lastly, issues to do with copyright and citation, that again should come out very strongly. Then I would also request that it's important for also the team to see how they can be able to build up libraries, and that library basically is the content that we have in place. Build up the content that is available, and let it be built up from the perspective of also Black people, or maybe even the people who are coming from India and the likes, you know, let that content be able to showcase the same. Create incentives. Let's have collaborative research, collaborative peer reviews, and the likes. So that's what I would say for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Euphrasia, for your contribution so far, and we hope we have some nice questions for you later. So let me go quickly to our second presenter, Alara. Alara, you wrote an opinion piece titled Decolonizing Systems Thinking, and this was featured in the Partners Global Resource page on situational awareness on systems thinking. Now, the IRC systems approach is very much directed towards understanding the complexity of providing water and sanitation services in so-called developing countries, and using that knowledge to ensure sustainable service delivery. Now, when I read your piece, there are words and concepts there that I never came across in IRC publications about systems thinking. There are words like empathy, support and care, creative acts of resistance, toxic positions of power, feminist and solidarity. Now, in which context are you using the term systems thinking?
Thank you, Cor, for your question and also for the invitation. And thank you, Euphrasia, for sharing your wisdom with us as well. It's a good question, Cor, in what context I'm using it, because I'm using it within an international development context and within a social change context, because that's where my professional experience is currently focused in. But I'm also using it in a personal and political context. And I'm drawing ideas from feminist academics, for example, and indigenous knowledge. So my word choice and vocabulary was very intentional. So I'm happy that you picked up on that, because I see these ways of knowledge and ways of thinking, such as indigenous thinking and feminist activism and social change projects, as very intertwined ideas within the system. But often I think in Western academia or within international development, we are very focused on seeing them as separate entities or separate knowledge systems, that we don't put enough time and energy into weaving these together. So I was also very much inspired by my own personal experiences as a human rights activist when I was in Turkey, for example, where I'm originally from, or my immigration experience to the UK as a international student first, as self-employed migrant.
Okay, thank you. Within that context, which you just explained, you talk about the need to decolonize systems thinking. What do you mean by that, and why is it necessary?
Well, in short, two things. Number one is to acknowledge the legacies of colonialism and injustices that we are born into, especially now with the injustices that COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter movements have showed us. We are seeing that we are not only responsible for the systems that we are currently in, but we are responsible and accountable for the systems that have been created by our ancestors. So there is a big need into coming to terms with that, even though we have not been personally affected by these injustices, we see that we have intergenerational trauma and legacies of past events that are on us. So for me, decolonization is number one, coming to terms with that and bringing these discussions to the table. And number two, creating safety and support networks for disadvantaged communities so that they can be honest when they share their truth and when they share their personal experiences and professional experiences, whether that's within an international development organization or more in an informal setting. So as you all know, true change does come from the communities who have been affected by that issue or injustice the most. But in order for that to happen, they have to be willing to open up and to be brave enough to open up. So it's very important to create trust and safety within the organization or also within outside partnerships so that these communities can become active in the system.
Okay, thank you. That aligns very much with the leave no one behind concept we're also promoting in the WASH sector. And finally, can you give an example of how decolonizing systems thinking works in practice from your personal experience or based on what you have read?
At the moment, I'm mostly working as a facilitator. I'm facilitating workshops on migration and climate emergency, and I'm also facilitating networking events. So for me, facilitation and decolonization, they start with communication. For example, in workshops designs, and this can be any gathering or any meeting or a call such as this one. How do you share power and how do you make sure that everyone involved in the process or the event or the meeting feel that they are able to be active agents of change and they are able to lead? And to give a more specific example, within the London International Development Network, we are a group of young professionals who work on organizational change and systems thinking. So in our networking events and our events on social justice issues within the international development sector that we organize, we take turns in facilitating. So we emphasize horizontal leadership. And it really makes a difference when you take turns when you're in a room. You take turns to talk about what you are most passionate about or to lead the room. So I do believe that these small techniques within the leadership and within facilitation and also at a core level in communications that we have, if you start from a vulnerable place, but then you make sure that in the room you have trust and safety, then everybody feels active and they become involved in the process anyways. And then this triggers an opening up process of everyone in the room. So then they start sharing their own stories and own truth about decolonization. So it comes automatically. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'd like to open the floor for questions. And Ingeborg Krukert, she was monitoring the chat box. So Ingeborg, do you have a number, have you selected a number of questions from participants that you would like to ask Alara or Euphrasia?
Yeah, I've been watching the chat box. I think we have 32 participants now, and using Euphrasia's typology, it would be about 12 from the south, if I could put it like that. There was one question from Florence. I'm not sure if you would like her to ask that question herself. And Martin gave an example. Martin from Uganda, he said we had 2 pilots of prepaid solar meters in Kabarole district with a foreign NGO, and the WASH information was on a dashboard not controlled in the district but somewhere, question mark, so not even clear where. And those 2 meters became non-functional and not repaired until now. So to add on to some of the examples you were mentioning. But Florence was asking about the consultative processes with the southern, in quotation marks, people. So what are the consultative processes. I don't know, Cor, you would like to ask this question, Florence, to ask this question, or?
Yeah, it would be nice if she could
I think that
ask.
would be, then she can explain. Florence, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Ingeborg, and thanks, Euphratesia. My question is that at what point during the consultation is the southern people consulted, and if they are consulted, is that a participation that is valid in terms of defining the need that is on the ground? But also the other part is, at the point of sustainability, who is accountable to ensure that the interaction between the South and the North ends up into sustainable, say, WASH services in this case? Thank you.
Okay, so do I go ahead and reply, or do we pick up some more?
Could you reply, please? Now?
Okay, then. I think it varies from donor to donor, and that is why in my article I indicated that this post is political, because water is political. Various donors have their own ways of engaging the actors, but most of them usually hurry these projects, and therefore consultation is usually done probably at the moment where you want to kick off the project. And you see, at that time, given the situation in Africa in terms of water access, at that time you're hungry. And you see, when you're hungry, the person who feeds you rules you. And you say at the same time, a beggar's knees, we say a beggar's knees are subtle. So at that time, you really do not want to argue too much on the content that is available, because at the same time, donor funding is not enough in the sector. And here you are, you're feeling like you are lucky. So people go ahead and agree on some of these issues, hoping that the clauses in the MOUs can probably be amended later on when an M&E meeting or maybe a progress meeting will be held. But these meetings are rarely held. So the project continues in the mode that it was provided with from the beginning. And then at the same time, when you ask about consultation, I believe there's something about a partnership or a collaboration. It's a relationship. And a relationship is something that should not wait for a particular time to be put on check. I think consultation should be going on all through the project implementation period. And that actually starts from the project conception. The problem is that at conception level, the Southerners are not involved. So that's what needs to be done. And that's, again, the perspective of social accountability. I believe, again, keeping the project in an accountable manner also is about ensuring that every person in the whole project implementation team has space. We have structures, we have a system of free communication on whatever details that are available. So those are my views on the same.
Thank you. Ingeborg, do you have any more questions?
Yes, there is a question from Deepinder from India. He can't access the chat, so I would like to ask if he could just pose his question by unmuting. And then there's a question from Jeske on recommendations to IRC on how we can take this further. But maybe first Deepinder, if he can unmute.
Thank you, Ingeborg. Thank you, Cor, and the two speakers. My question is actually a comment based on my work and engagement in India on WASH. And my comment is that in India, we have seen movements, livelihoods-based issues, credible research organizations, whenever they have been involved in determining the WASH agenda, and whenever there have been local leadership, national or subnational, to any WASH agenda, which is part of either a livelihoods issue or a movement issue, then it has always gone far and developed new ideas and new content, new understanding and knowledge. And that seems to be missing. And I feel that's one problem of this decolonization. Agendas are being set from the top. And there is no interdisciplinarity of reality of livelihoods, movements, issues. So you come with one issue and you try to generate WASH knowledge around that. Then you come with another issue. Then you come with the third issue. So this knowledge agenda setting, I think, is important. And I believe international development organizations, bilateral agencies like ADB, World Bank, and others, they need to think about this, of how democratically they can set platforms or processes to set the WASH knowledge agenda. So briefly, that was what I wanted to just get in. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepinder. Ingeborg, I think you had a question from Jeske. It was actually this was actually a question I had myself, but was leaving for this moment here. I think can we ask that question for both of the speakers now to give their ideas for IRC, what we could do to decolonize our knowledge management or systems thinking. Can we start with Euphrasia for her recommendations for IRC, if you have them?
Okay, I believe actually IRC is already on track towards addressing some of these issues, giving platforms for engagement for people like us, sourcing people who have been able to write about the same or probably are researching about the same is a very good move, and we appreciate it. Then the second thing, the issue to do with communication, it's very important. It can never stop. The messaging can never stop. It needs to go on and on and on. So I think it's important for IRC to develop more communication tools on the same, and also make a clear stand that this is the approach of IRC towards the conversation. And then the other thing is how IRC as an institution, again, cannot be viewing some of these issues from the perspective of SDG 6 in terms of only water, but also try to loop in other SDGs like SDG 10 and SDG 16. And this is going to help you to affirm some of your activities better in terms of transparency, accountability, participation, and the likes. Then issues to do with mutual accountability in your work, it again needs to come out very strongly. I would also be interested in seeing how the content, especially your libraries, can be able to now showcase that this is a whole decolonized organization. For now, that's what I would think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Alara, what would you like to tell us that we could do?
Thanks, Kor. So I know that you are already working a lot on these issues. So you are a leader in the WASH sector, but also in the international development sector. So going beyond and taking things a step further might be good. For example, I know that you have a great knowledge hub and great products, and I know that you have lots of publications. For example, how about incorporating indigenous knowledge, or how about reaching out to activist communities who don't have a space to publish, be as much visible within Western academia as possible because they have been in a relatively disadvantaged position. There's a lot of knowledge in places that we don't look, and these communities, because they are not willing to open up or because they have been outcasted by the Western knowledge platforms, they tend to not share their systems, or there is not trust. But if you as IRC, as a leader in the knowledge hub, in the sector, and in the world in general, reach out to these communities and try to use that knowledge together with these communities in a way that makes sense and in a way that can be turned into practical knowledge that can be applied in WASH systems, that would be very useful. And number two is asking uncomfortable questions. I know that you are going to have internal dialogue sessions as part of your internal review process with the Black Lives Matter agenda. So in these workshops and in these dialogues, get uncomfortable, ask each other uncomfortable questions. And this can be, for example, the question that I ask in the organizations in UK is, do you sponsor visas for non-EU citizens? And usually the answer is no. So, for example, if you want to start from somewhere, you can look at your internal staff within the Netherlands or in the EU countries and see if a non-EU person approaches you and wants to be employed by you, would that be possible? Or if you're not sponsoring visas, why not, for example? These questions that are actually very important, but they get neglected because we are so used to living in the system and accepting the system as it is. So don't be afraid to be bold and to get uncomfortable, and also to lead the sector, the WASH sector and the international development sector, because you have a lot of power and a lot of value. So you can share your knowledge and spread your knowledge to other areas outside of the WASH sector as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Our time is nearly ended now. I would like to thank Euphrasia and Alara for their contributions and a lot of food for thought for us, for IRC, to work further on our Black Lives Matter program, let's say. And yeah, we need to start to get uncomfortable, asking uncomfortable questions, which I think is a good way to close this session. So thank you very much also to the participants, and also for Ingeborg for helping with the chat. So shortly, or I think tomorrow, or shortly after that, at least for people within IRC, they will be able to see the video, and I will send some more information about the two thought pieces and other information about the topic. And for other people who are not at IRC, we'll have to see how we can have a different arrangement about that, how they can access this video, but more will come afterwards. So thank you very much. And yeah, let's start with the Black Lives Matter process in a good way. Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Cora, and thanks to everyone who attended.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. This was really, really nice, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.